Assume that you are driving in the highway in the first lane at a speed of 115 kilometers per hour, and there is this person who is coming behind you, who is always honking the horn and flashing the light, tempting you to either speed up or to shift to the other lane. Now you know, in a highway, the maximum speed limit is 120 kilometers per hour in most of the cases. Therefore, even though this person is pressurizing you to speed up, you should not break the law. It is a necessity which has been imposed by the law. But at this juncture, when this person is trying to hit you, you know that there is no safe distance between him and you. And if all of a sudden you press the brakes, you all will be in trouble. Therefore, you do the most appropriate thing. You pull off to the second lane. Welcome to Mindful Contract Administrator. In our real life, we are doubtful whether to take a decision based on necessity or appropriateness. It applies to contracts as well. If you could remember the FIDIC 1987 Red Book, the variation clause 51.1, it says a variation can be issued if it is, in the engineer's opinion, being necessary or appropriate. What does that mean? You have to understand the notion behind that one. Suppose that in the contract there is a slab that you wanted to be constructed, supported by 4 columns. All of a sudden, the structural engineer realizes that these 4 columns are not sufficient enough to transfer the weight of the slab into the ground. Therefore, there are 2 more additional columns required in order to safely transfer the load of the slab. Otherwise, the slab will collapse or the structure will break. Therefore, there is a necessity to introduce 2 additional columns into the structure. You cannot break it. But what do you mean by appropriateness? Sometimes you may think this term is a very subjective term, because something which is appropriate to you may not be appropriate to me. It applies to the parties to the contract as well. But in certain scenarios, it is required. For instance, let's say that you are doing a housing scheme project and there is a station, petrol gas station, that you wanted to build there. But knowing the trend in the future, you realize the fact that there will be electric cars which will be passing by. So, what is the most appropriate thing to do? To incorporate some charging points which may not have been included within the initial contract. So, it is the appropriate thing to do looking at the future trends. So, this particular word appropriate also has a significance in doing a variation. But when you see the FIDIC 1999 version of the Red Book, you can see the word necessary and appropriate has been eliminated from the opening paragraph. But if you go down that particular clause, you can see whenever there is an additional work which has been introduced by the engineer, it needs to be necessary for the completion of the works. But what happened to the appropriateness? Did FIDIC forget about that? No. There are various control measures FIDIC has introduced from 1999 version onwards in order to embed the idea of appropriateness into the variation clause. One of them is the value engineering clause, because whenever there is any design which is costly, you can think of alternative solutions to give the same function and the same quality at a lesser cost, which gives the meaning of the value engineering. But this particular clause 13.2, which is included within FIDIC 1999 version and onwards, gives a more comprehensive meaning than this particular value engineering clause. If there is anything which is beneficial to the employer also, if it is doable, if it is justifiable, if it is sustainable, that can be adopted. And another beautiful thing in FIDIC 1999 and onwards is variation can be issued by an instruction, or variation can be based on a request either from the engineer or from the contractor. Either case, the most appropriate version can be accepted. FIDIC will not just accept whatever is proposed by the engineer or the contractor. Now, for example, in FIDIC 1987 version, there is no express term to object to a variation. But if you see the 1999 version of FIDIC Red Book, in the variation clause, the contractor has the right to object if there is anything which cannot be bought, the goods which cannot be bought outrightly pertaining to the variation, because it may incur additional costs, it may incur additional time, and maybe the material which is stipulated is not at all purchasable. But FIDIC 2017 version extended this objection to variation clause with two more additional clauses. One, if the variation includes something which is beyond the intent of the specification, that can also be objected by the contractor. It says the nature and the scope of the works. If you are talking about building a bridge and the specification stipulates about building a bridge, you cannot ask the contractor to build a tower because it is not within the scope and nature of the specification stipulated within the contract. The other thing, the safety aspects. If contractor sees that the instructed variation is beyond the safety measures or else environmental measures which has been adopted within the country, he can object to a variation. So the necessity has been embedded within this particular variation clause as well in a different form. So if it is stipulated by the law of the country, definitely it is a necessity, like the example which I have given to you. You cannot exceed the speed limit. Other thing, you cannot break the law. Now, for example, this is a chessboard. I know most of you might be knowing about the chess. This is a clock which is being used in the game of chess. What does that mean? This particular chess clock limits your thinking time. So this is the necessity which has been imposed by the game of chess when you are playing a time restricted chess game. So no matter how well you are positioned in the chessboard, you have to abide by the necessity which has been imposed. This is like the law in the country. But thinking about the appropriateness, if you have enough time, your thinking time is permitted in order for you to do more thinking and be more sensible in making a move. That is appropriateness. I hope now you understood what is the difference between the necessity and appropriateness, and FIDIC Red Book 1999 version onwards, even in 2017 version, these two terms, the significance of these two terms have been identified and embedded in a more comprehensive manner within the FIDIC Red Book. Thank you.